Do you ever feel stuck? The alarm goes off and you think, is this really my life? Do you wish you could douse your relationships or your career or even your business with rocket fuel and throw a match on it? End the blah once and for all. They either launch or they burn up and you get to start over. I've been there and I see you. I'm Ben Walters, an entrepreneur, pastor, coach, and consultant. If you're ready to get unstuck and ignite your super pumped life or business, I'll give you the rocket fuel and the match. All you have to do is light it. Welcome to the Super Pump Podcast. In today's episode, you'll learn how jumping off a moving train is the best decision of your life. You heard that correctly. Jumping off a moving train will be the best decision you ever made. Now, I need to rewind a little bit to tell you why that would be a great decision. When I was in high school, there was a train track between my house and the high school. And so in order to get to school, we would have to cross that track, which was never a problem unless there was a train on the track. Then it became a problem. And what we learned fairly quickly in our freshman year was the train usually came between our school and our house between 8 and 8:30. School started at 8:30. We're leaving around 8:15. If we're running late, 8:20, and riding our bikes to school. And so first couple times the train was in our way, we diligently, politely, and safely, appropriately waited for the train to pass, and then we showed up to school about 8:40. Well, we told our teacher, yeah, the train was in the way. Teachers back then, this was not, they didn't coddle the kids like they do now. And so this was not a valid excuse. They said, well, it's a simple solution. Get up earlier, leave at 7:30. Then you'll know you'll be in here plenty of time before the 8 o'clock train rolls in. Well, we didn't really like that idea. Can you imagine a high school kid? Yeah, let me get up extra early so I can be on time, all because a train may or may not be in your way. And so my cousin Greg and I, we mastered the art of what we called train jumping. Now, don't try this at home, but back in those times, it went fairly slowly through our town. And so we would ride our bikes right up to the track. And then our trick was, because the train was empty at that point, so we would throw our bike right up on a flatbed car on one end and then wait for the little ladder on the side of the train to come up. And we would climb up the ladder, get on the top, walk down the flat car as the train is moving, of course, throw the bike off, which there's an art to that. You don't throw it far enough, it can get mangled under the train. And if you throw it too far, it collides and beats it all up. And then you've got to fix your bike. So there's an art to that. But then you would throw the bike off and then jump off the train. And so we got really good at that. We kind of knew how to land the landing and just that whole process. So we talked about that often, how we often had to jump the train going to school. And so we had another cousin. He was 8 years younger than me, David, the Weasel. And he looked up to Greg and I as kind of older brother, older cousin, and always wanted to do what we did, whether it was sports or whether it was just anything we did, going to games, that was fun for him. And so he always wanted to jump a train. But of course, he was at school at his elementary school when we did that. So there was never really an opportunity. Well, fast forward to college age. Greg and I are in our right around 20, 21, and David is 12 or 13 years old. And we went to Minneapolis to see my brother, Tony. Tony is a great Special Olympian, and he made the International Special Olympics up in Minneapolis. So he's competing against the best race walkers in the world. We had to park fairly far from, this was the time of the Metrodome in Minneapolis where the Twins played and the Vikings played. So we had to walk fairly far from our car to the Metrodome to watch him compete and then back every day. And so there was a train yard, a big train yard downtown Minneapolis near there where we parked. And we would walk over this big bridge to get back to the lot. Well, one day we decided, for whatever reason, instead of going up the stairwell to the bridge and then across the bridge and then back down the stairwell to the parking lot, we would cut through the train yard. Seemed like a good decision at the time. And for David, the light went on. He's like, oh, wow, I'm actually in a train yard with the guys who know how to train jump. This is pretty cool. And so we were like, I'm sure there won't be any leaving the train station at that time. Well, sure enough, we passed 3 or 4 tracks and we come to a train that is just creeping out of the station. So very slowly. And I said, buddy, this is the moment. It's time for you to learn to jump a train. And he was so excited. And for Greg and I, it seemed really simple because we didn't have bikes with us that day. So we jogged alongside. I got up on top of the flatbed car first, got on. Then Greg came behind me, and then David saw what we did, and he did it third. He did it great. So then we were all up on top. And then I jumped off first, and then Greg jumped off. But in the process of me getting on the train, and then Greg getting on the train, and then David getting on the train, and then kind of reconvening at the top, and then jumping off. By the time David, the third one to jump, was ready to jump off, that train was picking up speed. And you could see in David's face. So Greg and I both jumped off, and we're looking on the train. We're running alongside, actually jogging alongside. And you can see this terrified look on the weasel's face. Like, oh, this sounded like such a great idea. This doesn't feel really great now. And we know this train is pulling out of there and picking up speed. We know how that works as experienced train jumpers. So we're running alongside, trying to break through to him. Jump, 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 weasel, jump. And he's glazed over. He's like, I'm scared. I'm paralyzed. Can I jump? Can I not jump? But we can't pull him off. It's too dangerous to get that close because you can end up under the wheels and crushed to death. And so we're running alongside, jump, jump, jump. And that train is picking up speed. And it's to the point now we're almost at a full out sprint next to the train. Jump, jump, jump. Finally, there's just this light goes off for David, and he's like, I'm going to do it. Let's the heck with it. And he just jumps off that train. Well, he got really jacked up. His shirt was all tore up. His pants were all tore up. He was bleeding. He was a mess. It was a scary moment for us. And so then we get back. We were actually in a motorhome with our entire family. So we were trying to usher him into the motorhome and back to the very back to the bathroom and change his shirt and clean him up, all while keeping my parents and grandparents distracted as to what in the world we were doing. So that was what we did. I was thinking about that as I think about life, and you think back on things you did, often stupid things you did. And I thought how David was on the wrong train and how we've all had these moments where we're on that train. We know we're on the wrong train and we're headed somewhere we don't want to go. Now, for David, it was scary because we didn't know whether that train from Minneapolis was headed to downtown Chicago, whether it was headed out to the Dakotas and then on to Seattle, or maybe south to St. Louis. We had no idea. And we were terrified because we thought, if that train rolls out of the station, if he's on it and we have to tell our parents, bad news, David's on a train and we don't know where it's headed. We might never have seen the light of day. But in this story of David being on that train, what you find out and what David even learned was the longer you wait to jump off that train, the more stuck and scared you become because these trains pick up speed. And the longer you wait, the more painful it is to jump. I want to talk about relationship trains we get on. And I want to talk about specifically people in their 20s, because I think that's a time when, often people are pairing up with others and trying to find partners and just that kind of thing. And there's a lot of pressure. There's weddings of your peers that are happening, and there's, people at work that are getting married and just sort of finding their way with relationships. And I've known a lot of people who are in relationships, and I wouldn't say if either partner's honest, it's the right relationship, but it's comfortable. And it's nice to have someone, right? To not go home to an empty apartment. And it's nice to know that, hey, I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend, or whatever that might be. And so even though this isn't the right train, you stay on that train. But you know what happens to those trains? They begin to pick up speed. And all of a sudden, you're with that person. And the next thing, people maybe at Thanksgiving dinner are saying, you thinking about popping the question? Or you might decide, you know what, my lease is up and maybe we should move in together. And you're like, again, I'm not sure this is the right train, but seems like what we ought to do. So that begins to pick up speed. And you move in together, you get married. Well, then you're on that train, right? You're full on that train. That train is beginning to cruise along. Or maybe your person gets pregnant. That happens too. All of a sudden, that train just hit turbo boost, right? And so you're on that train. And here's what happens as it continues to pick up speed. Maybe you have kids and the entanglements just grow and grow. And it gets almost impossible to get off that train, right? That train is barreling down the tracks. And if you want to jump off that train now, guess what? It's going to be messy. If you have kids, you're going to be fighting over custody. It is going to be painful. There is going to be emotional pain. There is going to be financial pain. There is just going to be this trauma, all because you jumped on a train and you knew early on you needed to jump off that train, even if it would hurt a little bit, even if you'd have to go to a wedding by yourself or come home to an empty apartment or maybe do laundry on a Saturday night solo. But I'd rather you jump off that train than go barreling down the tracks to somewhere you don't want to go. I also see this in careers. I've seen so many guys I know who decide right out of college, well, I don't really love this, but the pay's good. And, I've got some student loans maybe. And so I'll just do this for a couple of years. I hate the work. It's mind numbing. I've seen this for a number of people in finance and law where they're like, I don't like this. I don't want to be a junior partner or not even a partner at all, an associate, but I got to put in the time and I got to grind. But I'll get out. I'll get off that train. This is just a year or two. I'm just going to knock out some debt and that's going to be that. But a funny thing happens. That train begins to pick up speed. All of a sudden, you're part of that company and you're still driving around in a 9-year-old Hyundai. Well, everybody else is driving a BMW and an Audi and a Lexus. And you think, well, maybe I need a little better car in the parking lot. I'm kind of looking like a clown out there. So you buy that car with the huge car payment. And then people say, let's go over to your house after work for drinks. And you say, well, I don't really live in the best part of town in this tiny little studio apartment. So you think, yeah, I've got to switch that up. So I've got to get a little bit better duds. And so all of a sudden you either buy something or you're just paying, $3,600 or $5,000 a month in rent or whatever that is. And you're kind of trying to keep up with this whole everything that's going on that train. Next thing you know, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years go by, and you have just been on a train that you hate for almost a lifetime. And jumping off that train now is really going to be painful. So now all of a sudden, what are you going to do? You're going to turn in the luxury car, turn in the lease early. You're going to sell the house and downsize to somewhere smaller. You're going to no longer go out to the nice restaurants. All those things are part of that pain if you're going to jump off that train later. When the whole time, if you would have jumped off that train early on and said, this train isn't headed where I want to go and I need to get off. Maybe a couple of bumps and bruises, but you're no worse for the wear. A final train I want to talk to you about is if you're on a train surrounded by the wrong people. Now, as a pastor, I've seen this a lot with addiction. I've seen people who want that path to sobriety. They want it bad. And yet the baby daddy or the friend circle is still using. You can't be on the train to sobriety and be on the train surrounded by all the people who were a part of that lifestyle that you had when you got on the wrong train. And I see that with even just in a less extreme measure, when you've got a friend group that maybe isn't supportive. They tend to backbite you and talk about you behind your back, and they don't support you. And yet that's the group you have around you. You don't have to have that group. You don't have to stay on that train. And the funny thing about this is you've got two choices with this. You can jump off the train or you can push them off the train. Now, what I'll say is it's much harder if you're on a train surrounded by a bunch of people to think you're going to push them all off. Chances are they're going to overpower you, right? So you are probably going to have to take that leap and jump off the train knowing, wow, there goes that train off into the distance with all the people I know. And here I am starting over. Maybe I'm bloody right there next to the train track, but that's okay. Pain is part of this. You may have to have pain in order to jump off that train. I got a couple little bruises when I jumped the train. Greg got a couple. David got a lot more because he waited just that much longer. But when you're waiting months and years and sometimes even decades to jump off that train, it's going to be tough. But you can do it. I know you can do it. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the opportunity cost. It's an economist term. It says that every minute you are spending on one thing, you are not spending on another. And in the case of trains, every minute you're spending going on a train in the wrong direction are minutes and hours and days you're not on that fulfilling train that's headed in the right direction. In fact, being on the wrong train in the wrong direction is putting you further and further and further from the very life, the very career, the very relationships you crave most deeply in your heart. As we wrap up today's episode about why jumping off trains is a good idea, I want you to remember 3 key takeaways and a disclaimer. First, life isn't going to stop for you to methodically get off one track and jump onto another. That's not how it works. If you think the world stops for you or anybody, it doesn't. So you're going to have to jump off those moving trains. And jumping off is going to be messy and it's going to hurt, but that's okay because you can do it. You can take that leap. The second important thing to take away today is the longer you wait to jump off the trains that are going in the wrong direction in your life, the more painful this will be. And the further away you will find yourself from that very place it is that you want to go. So time is of the essence. If you're on the wrong train, it's going to be painful, but jump off sooner rather than later. There is no perfect time. You'll be able to lick your wounds, and then you'll be able to board a train to somewhere you're excited to really go. And the third thing I want you to remember is friends and families and coworkers can run alongside and yell and scream for you to get off the train. That's what Greg and I were doing for our cousin David. We were running as fast as we could, screaming, jump, jump, jump. But ultimately, David had to make that decision. And ultimately, you have to make that decision. Your parents or your friends or your spouse, all of them can tell you you're on the wrong train, you've got to jump. But ultimately, it's up to you. It's your life. And I know you can do it. So take that big first jump, first step. Now, one quick disclaimer. For all of you knuckleheads out there, and I was one of them, like an idiot, jumping, moving trains, really stupid thing to do. So that is a terrible idea. Don't do it. You can get hurt. You can even get killed. Trains don't mess around. So today's episode, just remember this, is a metaphor. Don't jump on or off moving trains, and definitely don't push other people off of them. Thanks for joining me today on the Super Pumped podcast. If you enjoyed today's show as much as I did, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app and tell your friends about the show so others can find and benefit from the Super Pumped community. And finally, to put the ideas from today's show into action, visit us at superpumped.com to view the show notes, book a complimentary consultation, or take our free business launch readiness assessment. Keep well, and I'll see you next time.